This year, I was able to have a bucket list adventure traveling to Chile with my wife and oldest son, Peyton. Peyton had done a service mission there prior, and so we were returning and he was going to show us where he had served in different areas, and we were able to just tour the coastline and the mountainous area. And Chile was very interesting. I've never been there before. It's just a huge, long, skinny strip, which is pretty much beachfront and mountains. So it's this kind of interesting mix of beach and mountains. And one of the adventures we were able to do was hike and summit this active volcano, which was a little wild, considering there's still smoke spewing out of the mountain as we were there. And it's also ice capped, so you have to have all the ice gear and crampons and ice axe and all the crazy stuff. Helmet. I'd never done it before, but it was a really cool adventure. And when you're climbing, you're able to do it in a day. So it's a cool, highly recommended adventure if anybody is up to climbing an icy active volcano. Go to Vulcan, Villarica. And I've got some good tour guides I could recommend too. They're amazing, the ones that we went with. And you can only do it at certain times of the year because of either the activity of the volcano or weather-wise, because it is very snowy and can be life-threatening depending on the weather. But if you can go in the right time of the summer, great time to do it. But it was also interesting. I learned a lot of life lessons from it, lessons for my practice for life, and figure I'd share those with you here on this podcast. It's interesting too, when you're doing a hike like that, you have a lot of time to think because it gets harder and harder and harder the further up you go. Less oxygen, your legs start really getting tired, and all you can do is just focus on one foot in front of the other. Just keep going up, and there's a lot of time to think. And so when I was doing that, I had a lot of these different ideas come to me and how I could apply them to my practice and life. And so that was what this podcast is going to be. And a couple lessons were learned. One is you need a well-trained dental team to run your practice in your absence. And that was something that I was thinking about when I was on the mountain. For one, I couldn't have even been there. Either that or my practice would be closed and my patients would be not being able to be taken care of or seen elsewhere if I didn't have a well-trained dental team, both other providers and a great office manager, great lead assistant, a great team overall. All of our team there was able to run things in my absence with no problem. They had to handle, there's some service agreement issues that had to be handled. Different things came up, and the team was able to take care of it, no problem, while I was gone. I would get texts here or there, but I couldn't have any text when I was on the mountain. And really, we were there for a little over a week, but most of the time they could have handled everything. And that's comforting to have a team that's well-trained, that's able to do that. So that was one lesson. To really have a lifestyle as a dentist, you really want to have a well-trained team that can handle things in your absence. Otherwise, you're always going to be the bottleneck, and you're always going to be trapped to the chair because either you're going to be closed, your patients aren't being seen, or you've got to be at the chair because things can't be handled when you're not there. So, and that's another part of the doctor duplication, that the patients can be seen as well, not just phone calls can be handled, but the patients can be seen with doctor duplication. Another important lesson that I learned was having a guide who knows the mountain and knows the road ahead. This is a big, massive lesson that I learned. And we had some incredible guides. Maurice from France, this amazing female adventurer named Maurice, and then also Sebastian and Christian, two guys from Chile. All three of them were incredible. They knew the mountain. They hiked it many times. And it was an interesting lesson on a good advisor, good coach, good guide to know where to go, because all three of them were in great shape. They were obviously athletic to be able to do this on a regular basis. Sometimes they'll make this summit 4, 5, 6 times a week when the weather's good, and also will have many times days and weeks when they can't do it because of the weather. So when the weather's good, they crank it out. And so you got to be in great shape just to do that. But if you were to look at them, you wouldn't think, oh, they're these Olympians or anything like that. I mean, they weren't incredibly strong, incredibly fast. At least their outward appearance wouldn't appear that way. But the biggest thing was they had been there, done that. They knew the road, they knew the hike, they knew where to turn on the areas for the summit to be safe, to not fall off a cliff, to get them and their team up the hill safely. They knew what precautions to take when on our way down. The weather started getting bad where we lost visibility, and when you at first look at the mountain, especially from far off, you're like, how could anybody get lost in this thing? I mean, it's just this big white mountain peak. But if you lose visibility, you could easily see how people could die if they were lost, couldn't find the right way, or just a little wrong turn. You could literally fall off cliffs that are several hundred feet high, which would not be a good situation. So thank goodness for guides, and applying that to life and dentistry and other things like that. Who are your guides for your life, both for your practice, for mentors, for coaches? When I started my practice, that was probably the best thing I did. The best investment I made was hire a coach for me, a guy named Ace Gorg that knew endodontics really well. Super good guy and knowledgeable. And the biggest thing was there were things I didn't know that I didn't know. And it was so comforting to have somebody that I could ask questions when I needed help, that had been down the road, had been through the tough times, faced similar challenges, be that with regulations or staff or clinical cases or efficiency. There's things that you can learn from a good guide, a good mentor. And since then, I've had several, both dental consultants, business coaches, mentors, different masterminds I've done, books and podcasts, the things I've read. And all those are good, but it's helpful to have somebody that you can call on the phone when you really need it, because sometimes you need a specific answer and you can't get that without a good guide, good mentor. So highly recommend on that in whatever area that is in your life. That could even be for your health, for other things like that. Having good guides, good mentors. Another big lesson was the hike is always longer than you think, and yet it's also doable. And so it's worth making the start and continue on the hike. When you look at the mountain, first it is overwhelming because you look at it and it's just this massive, huge ice-capped hill, mountain, I should say, with smoke coming out of the top because it's an active volcano. And so, but as you get closer to where we start to summit, you're like, okay, that's not bad. I can see the tip. We should be able to be there in an hour or two. And you start hiking and you start hiking and you start hiking and you start hiking. And then you're in there for a while and you're like, wow, we've barely made a dent. It's obviously further than we think. And so a lot of times in life, that's how things are too. Either A, we think something might be more difficult than it is, so we never start, or B, we don't give ourselves grace and ability to make mistakes, to start a process, move forward, and realize we're not going to be perfect when we start. Our practice isn't going to be perfect when we start. Nothing is going to be perfect when we start. We have to be willing to do something badly to get good. That really, just about anything we do, whether that's a sport, whether that's a new skill, a new technique, running a business, anything, you're gonna not be as good at the start as you are at the end. But the big lesson on that was you got to start and you got to keep moving forward little by little and not get discouraged. Quote by Tony Robbins, how most people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And that is very true, that a lot of times we just have to pick the right direction and continue to move forward. And that's one of the biggest things, is that you're focused in the right direction, because you could run in the wrong direction and get there slower than crawl in the right direction. So make sure you're at least, the destination, where you want to get, you're focused there, and then you can make real progress moving forward. Another lesson I learned that applied to dentistry was get good at certain areas in life and certain procedures and do them over and over. For example, these guides, they probably could have climbed all kinds of mountains, but they had done this climb up Vulcan, Villarica over and over and over for years. And so they knew it like the back of their hand. They knew the curves, they knew the dangerous spots, they knew the safe spots, they knew what to do if weather got bad. And so it was no big deal. They'd done the hike sometimes, as I said, 5 or 6 times in a week, where they would just do it day after day because the weather was good and there were a lot of tourists that wanted to do the hike. And so for us in dentistry, big lesson I learned on that is figure out what procedures you want to get good at and you enjoy and do them over and over and over. And I would avoid doing things that you don't feel like you can do predictably and get good results, and even just efficiently, where the patient's not in the chair for 3 hours and you can get good predictable results. Because one, it's going to be less frustrating for you. For another, you're going to be better at it. Your patients are going to enjoy it more. And it's going to be something where you can schedule around. I know many successful general dentists, and the ones that I know that are the most successful and make the most money, they are very good clinicians. They can do all kinds of procedures, and yet they know their wheelhouse of what they really focus on and get great at it and can do it fast, do it efficiently, and they refer out the stuff that they can't. And they have no shame in that, because they know there's certain things they could do, but if they can't do it efficiently, can't do it predictably, then what's the point? They'd be faster and more productive doing things that they can do at a more efficient scale and do it over and over. So that was a good lesson. Another big one is have a personal assistant. Back to when I was on the hip mountain, I had both the support of my dental team, but also had my personal assistant, Ramil, who helps with my emails, who helps with our video editing this video with my lifestyle dentist business. Amazing guy and very smart, and was super helpful when I wasn't available because I was hiking mountains and doing other things like that. He was able to take care of things in my absence, and we had some systems that he could follow to do that. Also, have a bookkeeper that was able to pay bills, handle renewals of different LLCs and things like that, that was able to take care of that when I was gone. So having personal assistants in your life is highly recommended. There's a great book by Dan Martell called Buy Back Your Life. And that's a highly recommended book that he talks about that, where essentially he says, if you don't have an assistant, then you are the assistant. That you can go fast by yourself or you can go far with a team. And so if you have a team, it's both productive and it makes life more enjoyable, because you can really focus on your areas of expertise and send out the rest that's not in your expertise, or things that you just don't enjoy. And some people think, well, I don't have that would be too costly to do that. There's a lot of different options that you could do to have an assistant. There's virtual assistants, like Ramil is in the Philippines and still able to help me tremendously. You can have part-time assistants. You can have somebody help buy your groceries, clean your house, different things like that on a part-time basis that can still be very helpful with what you're doing, but let you stay in your wheelhouse of doing dentistry and your investments or other things like that you can do predictably and higher dollar return on your time and less frustration because it's something you know well. Another lesson hiking this mountain was you need the right equipment. For us climbing this mountain, we had to have the right snow gear over our clothes. We had to have crampons, which look like these evil looking cleats, metal cleats, pretty cool to get up when we got in the icy sections. You had to have the crampons on your feet, an ice axe in case you fell, and to guide you going down, and learn how to use those too, a helmet to protect yourself. But in dentistry, we also have to have the right equipment. And I'm not a big fan of just buying the latest and greatest toy that's going to sit in your corner. And as dentists, we're probably usually more guilty of that than underspending, where we want to get the latest and greatest. And a lot of times we end up wasting our money because we buy something that might sit in the corner for years, and we use it 10 times and just stop using it, and then it just sits. Or the other extreme would be we don't get new technology that would be beneficial. For example, for me, cone beam technology is a game changer for endodontics. It's amazing how I can see where the canals are, what the problem is, where the lesion is before I even get in there. And that is like having a roadmap. I almost felt like I'm cheating because I know where I'm going before I even start the case. And that's a huge game changer. Was when I got cone beam back in 2015. My biggest regret was not getting it sooner because of how much it helped me. And so there are probably areas in your practice where it would be worth investing in technology that's going to make you more efficient, and something that you do on a regular basis so you can use it over and over. Another final lesson was taking breaks on the journey. That was something also that helped, where we would hike and hike and hike. And granted, we were with a group of about, I think there's about 10 to 12 of us, and everybody was at differing levels of health and athleticism and things like that. And we would typically go for about an hour and then stop. And as we got further up the hill, it might be 20 minutes and then stop because it kept getting harder and harder. But we would take frequent breaks, and that did help because we were able to catch our breath, get some water, get a snack. And when you felt like, oh, I can't do this anymore, after a good break, little rest, you felt good again. You're like, okay, I'm ready to go again. And applying this to our lives, both in dentistry and for anyone, it's so important to have those little downtimes where you can get away from the practice, go on vacation, to spend time with your family, to spend time with your sweetheart. They can be mini vacations. I remember when I was starting my practice and I couldn't get away from the practice, even just a staycation where we would go somewhere locally for the weekend would be fun and beneficial. And if I could do a 3-day weekend, it would still help. But just getting away, taking little breaks where you can refresh yourself, have a new mental clarity, and be fresh when you get back to the office and ready to work again. So taking those little breaks throughout your life is going to help you long term go further and have more longevity in your practice. Also, getting to a point where you don't have to work 5 days a week if you can. I recommend people getting to 4 days as soon as they can, even 3 days, even 2 days, possibly even 1 day at some point. But if you can get to where you enjoy being there and then also have rest to get away because you have doctor duplication, it's a nice situation where you can really go for a long time and still enjoy dentistry. So those are the lessons from hiking Mount Vulcan Villarica in Pucón, Chile, and hope those were helpful for you and any other adventures that you might be doing in your life and with your practice.